Welcome to Keeping Athena company. My name is Athena Venue. I'm a stand-up comedian, writer, podcaster, and a parent. And as you will know, if you listen to this podcast, I think parenting is great. However, my 14-month-old now, or 13, how old are you? That's right, you don't even know. You don't know anything. That's the point. She doesn't know anything. I can't talk about anything with her. So what I do is I invite a friend round to come round and keep my company. And today I've invited somebody into my home who I think I've spoken to more online than in actual real life, which is the way of the world these days, I think. But there you go. Welcome to my living room now, not my mum's kitchen. I have a living room, guys. Onwards and upwards. James Harris.
Hello, Athena. Hello, everyone.
Are you well?
I'm not well, which we've established. I'm a bit run down with the general November bad weather illness, but I am spiritually very well.
I think everyone's sick at the moment, and I think we're all like walking around going, "Oh, I've got the flu," but really it's just the election.
Yeah.
I think we're just we're sick of everything, and it's manifesting itself in like flu-like symptoms. But really, we're just sick of everything.
Yeah, the nation has some kind of like long-term flu.
Yeah,
which is just going to rumble on.
It's just a mist of political germs that we're all inhaling at the moment and sneezing out onto everyone. I'm sick of it. I'm really annoyed because yesterday there was an article in the Standard, the 21st of November. There was an article in the Standard. There was an interview with Jeremy Corbyn in which, in this interview, he said lots of things, and he said something along the lines of, there is no anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, right? Then the article got changed and that line was deleted because he didn't say it, which is very frustrating because people like me who like to call out the Labour Party, and in particular Jeremy Corbyn, were like, well, this guy's an idiot, typical Jeremy Corbyn, and he didn't say it. And this is the kind of thing that's very frustrating because we all want to be progressive, but we're not being allowed to be progressive because we're not even getting information in an honest way from things that we would think to be honest. This is a proper journalist in a proper publication.
Yeah, although it's weird because she's also an incredibly experienced journalist.
Yeah, what was her name? I forgot.
Lynn Barber.
Lynn Barber.
And she's like the interview. She's like the person. So it's incredible that someone with that experience would. I mean, that's obviously the statement. That particular statement is the most. It's like the headline quote of the entire interview.
Right.
So you'd think with something as inflammatory as that it would be checked. And she said online yesterday, well, I haven't checked yet. So presumably she's got a record of it. I don't know what is going on with that.
I think it's editorial. I think it's just not even I don't know what you call it, but I think it's editorial. I think when she sent it into someone said, that sounds like you said this, and stuck it in, quite frankly. And we'll never know the story as to how and why it got changed. But I think that what's happening now is something doesn't need to be true anymore. It just needs to be out there. And then the way our brains work, it's a bit like the way advertising works. They say in advertising, if you see something 7 or 8 times, you'll end up complying. So advertising isn't about seeing a picture and doing something. It's about seeing the same thing in different ways constantly. And that was one of the times that publication wanted us to see that sentence. And, it's wrong. My mistake, or it doesn't matter. Well, their intention was for us to believe he said it. It doesn't matter that they've retracted it. We've seen it now. And then in 2 days' time, something else will happen. So it's hard because something I believe passionately, Jewish people are victims of white supremacy in the same way that other people are. And so I'm always telling people about this. Like, this is not just like a random kind of racism that's happening out there in a field. It's the same racism that has colonized people and made people enslave people. And that's why I always talk about Black Klansman, the movie. Have you seen the movie Black Klansman? So that movie isn't actually about Denzel Washington's son character infiltrating the Klan. It's actually about a character who is Jewish who infiltrates the Klan. And he spends the whole time trying to like hide his Jewishness, because we talk about the Klan as being anti-black, but it was actually also anti-Jewish, very violently so. And it's really interesting that we don't talk about that as much. And my theory is people just like to talk about anti-blackness to always position black people in this particular way. But lots of people are victims of white supremacy, particularly Jewish people. So anyway, what I'm getting at is that we're always trying to have this progressive conversation where we position people in perhaps contextually more correct ways than they usually are, and then you've got these journalists who just make it even harder to be honest, and it's frustrating. Anyway, let's talk about something else. I'm sick of it.
I mean, I can't disagree with any of that. I mean, it doesn't help. I spend quite a large part of my time online arguing with people about anti-Semitism and writing about anti-Semitism.
Are you a practicing Jewish person?
I'm not practicing. I'm not really a Jewish person by anything other than people in my family being Jewish. So I was brought up.
Do your family practice?
No. I mean, my grandfather went off Judaism when everybody in his family got killed. Because he sort of said, if we're the chosen people, I don't want to see what the rest of people have to do with, because it's not really working out. So there's that side, my mum's dad, that side of my family. But it does mean that I've got quite a lot of Jewish family, quite a lot of Jewish friends, know a lot of people in the Jewish community.
Yeah.
And I'm quite interested in anti-Semitism and how it works. And what I saw yesterday, which was really pertinent to what you're just saying, was, Rachel Riley put up that photo of her in a t-shirt, wearing a t-shirt which had Corbyn's image when Corbyn was protesting against apartheid.
Yeah.
Which was, a huge thing to open, and to be honest, not the most sensible thing, I think, from her to bring into the debate. But a lot of people were saying to her, look, I'm not listening to you because you've got blonde hair. I'm not listening to a rich white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. Well, if Jewish people have blonde hair and blue eyes, that hasn't historically helped them from persecution. There's been loads of Jewish people. There's not, when you go to Israel as well, you realise that basically Jewish people are extremely ethnically diverse. They come from all over the world.
Yeah.
Ethiopian Jews, Ashkenazi, German Jews, and then, East European Jews, Sephardic Jews. So there isn't a single way or look to be Jewish, and having blonde hair and blue eyes doesn't exclude you from anti-Jewish prejudice.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that there's two things there. Having blonde hair, blue eyes, that kind of beauty.
The Aryan thing.
Yeah, not even Aryan. There's just her conforming to a universal European beauty standard. Has probably doesn't protect her from anti-Jewishness. Absolutely not. It has benefited her career. She would be let's be real. She would not be countdown numbers person if she wasn't as attractive or conventionally attractive as she is. My position on it is that I agree with you. However, I think in the same way that women can participate in patriarchy, people can participate in white supremacy even if they're not necessarily the beneficiaries of it. And that doesn't mean they do it constantly, and that doesn't mean they do it as a routinely. In that moment that she made that image, she was being a white woman, because somebody who really understood where they sat side by side with African people would not have deleted that message. But this is what happens when you participate with the oppressor. You switch off the part of your brain that acknowledges where you stand, and you think, hold on a minute, wouldn't that be a good idea? Trust me, if Rachel Riley was really woke, she wouldn't have done that. So generally, she's a Jewish person fighting for Jewish people and fighting for progressive values and calling out racism when she sees it. In that moment, that was the whitest shit I saw yesterday. Every day I see some white shit, and on Twitter, that was the whitest shit I'd seen. So I think that's the line. I think that's the interesting thing about Jewishness in the sense that Jewish people are white at the same time, unless we're talking about white supremacy, and then they're not white anymore because they don't fit that definition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So
it does.
If Rachel Riley's walking down the street and there's a guy who's really into white women, he's going to fancy her, know. But at the same time, if she's walking down the street and then there's a guy who hates Jewish people, he might walk past her because she doesn't. She doesn't have the conventions, that are stereotypically of a Jewish person, maybe in her dress or in her facial appearance. Like you said, Jewish people are diverse. So when people even say a Jewish person looks X, Y, or Z, that's almost like saying a mixed race person looks like X, Y, and Z. There's no central way anyone's supposed to look. So she doesn't conform to a physical stereotype, and that has benefited her. Then, as I mentioned on Twitter, people were then going, well, you shouldn't erase apartheid messages because Israel supported apartheid. It's like, oh, for fuck's sake, that's literally you couldn't be more anti-Semitic if you try. It's the definition. Anytime you bring up Israel into any conversation about Jewishness, you're just fucking racist.
Yeah, my favourite thing is Jewish people in this country being held accountable for Israel. Many of them have never been there.
Yeah.
And it's it's in the same breath people are like, what do you think about Israel? Sometimes to me or to other people they know are, people are much more Jewish than I am. But in the same next breath, they'll be like, the Tories have killed 100,000 people. It's like, okay, so Jewish people in this country are responsible for Israel, but you in your own country are not responsible for your own government. So it's a bit much then to make me responsible for a foreign government, as well. It's
so wild, and also, on particularly on the apartheid point, it's like the whole white Western world supported apartheid. It's something people forget. It was allowed to exist quite happily for decades because people were really supportive of the commercial benefits of oppressing the African majority in the country, and it only ended after negotiations with the ANC where they basically promised to keep the economic status quo. Which is why people forget this is why South Africa is very much in a very similar position economically to during the apartheid regime, because things haven't changed. There's still a class system that oppresses a certain demographic of people to enable things to be mined cheaply, for example, or to provide a service industry for the middle class and upper classes to keep them into the lifestyles they're accustomed to. So that hypocrisy and that people become experts in things they know nothing about. Like, don't talk to me about apartheid, you know nothing about it. Don't talk about Israel, you know nothing about it.
Yeah, well, anti-Semitism is quite a complicated set of issues as well. It has certain aspects. I think one of the things which I need to do is, I've been reading a lot about anti-Semitism in the last few years. I'm actually applying to do a PhD about it. So
interesting.
Quite interesting.
What's motivated that?
Well, I mean, getting anti-Semitic abuse personally, which is
that online or
no, in the street. I've had people calling, are you Jewish at me and things like that. I've had friends making anti-Semitic. So generally, I have a sense, and
is that a recent thing that it's increased?
Over the last few years, I feel it has increased, and I lived in Germany for a long time before that, which is sort of. A kind of ironic thing. I did encounter anti-Semitic attitudes in Germany, but obviously it's a difficult relationship, Germany-Israel, and the official kind of tone of it. I don't think what's gone on in the left in the UK would have been allowed to happen in Germany, because I think the left in Germany is more aware that anti-Semitism isn't just far-right people. Anti-Semitism, I suppose, like any form of racism, can occur in any group, in any part of society. So I think a lot of the answer I've kind of got about it is people sort of going, well, I'm on the left, so therefore I'm progressive. That means de facto I can't be racist because I'm on the left. But that's just a circular argument. You actually have to live anti-racism. You can't just sort of like just say, wear a t-shirt, like Rachel Riley again. We can't just wear a t-shirt like I'm an anti-racist. No, it's a practice. It's something, we've all been, like, I went to a comprehensive school in the 80s in the Midlands, and it was a very racist environment. And I've soaked up a lot of that racism subliminally, and I can't just say, like, okay, I'm on the left now, and I'm just going to forget all that. I've got to think about it. I've got to be aware of how these things work. And I think, sort of becoming aware of how even in a progressive milieu, kind of prejudice can work is what I'm kind of interested in. And I've just been reading about it, been thinking about it a lot, and just been seeing it. And I suppose it's like any racism. When you start seeing it, you want to call it out all the time. But that's exhausting. And because your own understanding of it gets very deep, and then other people's understanding of it is rightly, they don't necessarily have the time to spend a lot of time reading and thinking about anti-Semitism. If most of your family was killed because of it, it does seem kind of quite an urgent and real thing to be able to understand. So that's just where I am intellectually with it.
Can we talk about immigration? Because that's a thing I'm very much passionate about, the hostile environment and how damaging it is. I know that's something that impacted you.
Massively, yeah.
Are you okay to talk about that?
I am very happy to talk about it. Would you like me to say about what went on? I met my wife as a student. We were both studying interpreting. And that was a couple of years ago. That must have been in autumn 2016. And she was on a student visa, so it's very, very difficult for her to transition now from a student visa to a work visa. And with London Met, which was the uni which was involved in all the kind of visa scandals about giving people visas who weren't students, they're very, very strict with London Met students. So basically she had about a month after her studies were finished to find a job. It's not going to happen unless you're incredibly lucky. So we were together and very happy, so wanted to get married. We would have got married at some point anyway, but probably brought it forward a little bit. And we got married, and we applied to get a visa in October 2017. And they have something now called the minimum income requirement, which basically means that you have to satisfy that for the 6 months preceding the application to the visa, you have been earning a certain amount of money. At the moment, it's 18.6 thousand a year, which is above what about 42% of the population are earning annually. And then the alternative is if you're self-employed, they look at the last couple of years. And I'm self-employed. I was a part-time student. So they looked at that. But my self-employment over the last couple of years was below that. It was not 18.6. So despite the fact that we had quite a bit of savings as well, you were not allowed to combine your savings with self-employment.
Right.
And so they rejected the visa. And that meant that we had the option to appeal, which we did. We appealed it. But that meant that my wife had to stay in the country for the appeal, and they confiscated her passport, so she couldn't leave. And that took a year, basically. During that time, she was only allowed to work under the conditions of her student visa. And if she left the country, the whole process would be voided, and we would have to start again. And we wouldn't get any of the fees back. I should say the fees to apply for the visa are already substantial. They were about, like, with the NHS payment as well, it's about 2,000 quid. And there's a lot more now. So we had a very tough year, but we hung in there, and we eventually got to the appeal tribunal, and the judge found in our favour for mainly for the reason of the savings, which the judge considered outside of the official way. The judge kind of said that in future he thought our earnings would be more, and it was a good judgment. I'm very happy with it. I still got it. And then she was given permission to stay on that. The way it works now is you get 2.5 years, and then you have to go through the whole process again. The only positive the next time around is that both our incomes can be counted. So going through it and just seeing how basically it's, once you get into that hostile environment and they take your passport, it's impossible to get somewhere to live. It's impossible to explain to an employer. They wouldn't let her work because I wasn't earning enough money.
They wouldn't let her work because you weren't earning enough money.
I know. I mean, the absurdity.
Explain that rationale.
I don't understand it really. But for example, she didn't have a national insurance number. She didn't have a passport, so she couldn't get a national insurance number. So she was being held up by the system, stopped from working because because she wasn't earning enough money. I mean, the whole thing is just. So once you're into that kind of absurdo world, I mean, other people have it much worse than us. We had a couple of mates who were lawyers, and we also went to see a really good immigration lawyer. But even then, like, the lawyers were all telling us totally different things. Like, one lawyer was telling us, you've got a good chance here. And another lawyer was saying, this is a hopeless case. Yeah, I mean, it was tough. I mean, it was really tough. And people have been in this system for, 10, 12 years with their passport confiscated, maybe waiting for an asylum appeal to be heard. And it's outrageous. I mean, it is just the suffering. And there was a brief theme of sort of like, well, we feel quite sorry for Theresa May because she kind of works hard. But there's one politician who is the orchestrator of this more than any other, is her. I have no human sympathy for her because she has no human sympathy for other people. She
has no sympathy for anybody, and what her government... And I think the Labour Party are the architects of a lot of this too. I think the Tory Party, I guess, maintained or amplified... structures that, I mean, Labour Party Home Office ministers were all awful. You know what I mean? They were all idiots. David Blunkett, awful man. Do you know what I mean?
They're all very right wing.
Yeah, they're incredibly right wing. They wanted, I remember when they wanted indefinite detention of people, to detain people indefinitely. I mean, this is outrageous. So, this is very much a cross-party thing, but I would suggest the Tories are just slightly more evil, just slightly. But you're totally right. Theresa May is the architect of it, and it's all. I have this theory. it's all purely racist. It doesn't seem to impact quote unquote New World immigrants in the same way it impacts other immigrants. So people from Africa, the Caribbean, Asia. Brexit is the exception, but we're actually fighting very hard to allow EU nationals to stay. In fact, it's amazing how people are defending their Polish cleaners. Oh no, we can't, Agnes, we can't live without Agnes. Like, it's so cool that you care about EU nationals, but where is this energy for the rest of the world population that considered itself to be British for many decades, or considered themselves to be British for many decades? So it's I think it's basically anti-black and brown, quite clearly. I don't see any. I don't see any extreme.
I read some interesting things though, because like every country's got its own different relationship. So apparently, they're very keen to deport Latin American people.
Right.
They that's where it goes, but they often don't bother deporting Chinese people because the Chinese government just doesn't care and doesn't want them. And there's more economic pressure from China. Like if someone's a Chinese citizen's committed a crime in the UK, the Chinese government is more likely to say, you keep them, we don't want them.
And because we rely on China for so many things.
Exactly. It's the economic...
But we don't have those ties with South America.
So if you're Venezuelan or Bolivian, you've got worse cards in this scenario, I think.
I mean, I just think it's awful. And I think that if there's one reason to vote for anybody other than the Conservative Party, it's that. It's, I think, our sympathy for people who weren't born here, and even the children of people who weren't born here, because they were caught up in Windrush Tree.
Yep. It's outrageous, and I totally agree with you. If there's one reason to overlook things you don't like about Labour, for example, they have a much better policy now on this stuff. So I'm hopeful that in the long term, the injustice of this stuff will just become I know that's. But I think if they start pulling EU citizens into this system as well, there's just going to be so many cases of people like me, because they're going to implement this minimum income requirement for EU citizens as well. I hope that the pressure will eventually go too great. But one thing I would say is when I was going through it all and talking to people about it, even most of my family's quite right-wing Tories, to be honest.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm the... I mean,
why do you
my mum has completely changed because she doesn't like Brexit, but the rest of them are, generally fairly conservative people.
That's interesting. Is there a reason for that? Is there a kind of, is it like to do profession maybe?
Yeah, I think it is. I think they've all been in business to a greater or lesser extent. I think that they were always. Well, I mean, also in the 80s, the Labour Party had a fairly extreme phase as well, like the Michael Foot era, and following the 70s and the unionisation.
When you say extreme, do you mean...
Well, I mean, the 83 Labour manifesto was to withdraw from the EU, withdraw from NATO, unilateral abolition of nuclear deterrent. That, for my parents, that is not their politics.
That sounds like the 2019 manifesto.
Yeah, well, I think they're keeping the nukes, aren't they? They're not going to fire them, but they're going to keep them.
They're going to keep them, yeah.
Anyway, even though my parents and my family are a little bit more right-wing than me generally, they did not like the fact that I had to take the Home Office to court to get a visa for my wife. Okay. And they were not... I didn't meet anybody who said, we think these policies are good. I think people just don't know about them.
No, people don't know. You don't know about them unless you go through them or you know someone who's going through them. And that's a real shame, because it means the only people getting justice are the people who are getting in the newspapers. Yep. So just imagine how many people are living in this hell where they can't work. If you can't work, you can't pay your bills. If you can't pay your bills, you get made homeless. Yep. And you have to live with other people, or you live on the streets. I still can't get over the fact the government can't tell us how many people they deported wrongly. They can't tell us. I mean, this is. Could you imagine someone coming to your house and dragging you to a detention centre and then putting you on a plane and take you to a country that you have no knowledge of and you know nobody? And these countries, these are generally not the kind of these are white-wing countries. There's no welfare state. You know what I mean? There's no benefits you can sign up to in Jamaica. There's no baseline level of living that you can, because they didn't colonise the world. They don't have that financial infrastructure to do that stuff. So you are destitute. You're left destitute, and this country's done that. This country is guilty of these are crimes. This shit is criminal. And when people, I think a lot about structural inequality, and this is really a really good example of it. Like the structures are set up to allow these things to happen to certain people, and they don't happen to other people. It could never happen to you. It could happen to your wife, but you get that structure. We get with a British passport, and being born here, we are structurally protected from these things.
Yeah, that's what my dad said. My dad reads the Daily Express and is pretty right wing on immigration and stuff, and he kept saying to me sort of like. I don't understand why there's all these people who aren't sort of working harder. We're getting visas and they won't give you one. And I was sort of like, the system isn't going to make that kind of distinction. That laws aren't able to distinguish between the virtuous person and the law will just set a threshold, and that it's just gonna cut you off. There's no mercy.
It's interesting you say that though about virtuous. The law has decided some people are virtuous and some are not, and that's why
on financial criteria, virtuous equals money.
Yeah, that's true, and it's outrageous. I could talk about immigration and racism all day, and I often do, but let's not do that.
I want to say one more thing. It's very short. Immigration lawyers get into my show free.
Really?
Yeah, I had an audience made up largely of immigration lawyers. So if you're an immigration lawyer and you ever want to come and see me, I mean, I'm not very expensive anyway, but free seats for life.
That's it. I'm going to put all of James's contacts in the description of this podcast. So if you're an immigration lawyer, they get paid quite a lot of money, I'm sure.
The pro bono ones, particularly. No, they need but they also need a laugh. A lot of these people do need a laugh.
Pro bono ones go for free.
Yeah.
If you charge
£2 for the high earners.
They get paid hundreds of pounds.
I know one of them. I think it is $550 an hour or something.
Yeah,
the best guys.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
there we are.
anyway, well, I'll let you deal with the lawyers.
I'm just grateful for the audience to be.
I want to talk about what you do, which is really interesting. First of all, you are a fluent German speaker
And a fluent French speaker.
And a fluent French speaker.
I am, yeah.
I'm fascinated by polyglots because I've always wanted to speak a second language, and I've been learning French for so long. I just don't have a brain for it, but I get by. Tell me about your language journey. When did you learn? What inspired you?
Well, I was quite old, really. Like I moved to Germany when I was 21, and I said I'm not going to come back until I've learned German properly.
Right. That's quite a hard language.
Yeah, but it is also
7
quite.
Words for the.
They have more than 7.
Really? How many do they have?
Well, probably about. Well, because you've got 4 cases, so you've got 4 kinds of and so you've got. You've probably got about 16 different types of da, although some of them are phonetically the same.
Oh, okay, that's good.
But they like D as in feminine and D as in plural, they sound the same, but they are.
They're spelled different.
No, they're spelled the same as well. They're complete homophones. But you will know from context.
So you were determined. So you went to Germany, you came back, and
yeah. Well, I was there for ages. I was there for nearly 10 years.
Oh, okay. So that's the best, the immersive environment.
Yeah. My German is still much better than my French because I've never really lived in France.
Right, and French is all about the accent and the pronunciation.
Yeah,
too.
but I like I read a lot in French. I watch a lot of French movies. So there's a lot of stuff going on in France, which
what motivated you to learn French?
Well, because basically in my profession in translation, you really need another to stand out, to have enough work. Because if I just translate German, I've got enough. But if I've got French, then I really always have got enough.
And what do you translate? Do you do oral translation?
I do. Well, yeah. That's my MA. I'm a qualified interpreter for French and German.
Okay.
But most of my written stuff is quite boring.
Right.
But I like it. I mean, I always enjoy it.
Do you ever work for footballers?
I do.
Do you?
I can tell you a very cool job which I did. The last time Bayern Munich came to London to play Tottenham, they needed someone to do all the PA announcements in the stadium in German, and I did them all. Willkommen beim Champions League Spiel. Yeah, you know. So
the Champions League.
Yeah, exactly. And I've done some good gigs, but I've never had like 3,000 German fans going like, yeah.
Can you do something for me? Can you do a German introduction to my podcast? Can you say welcome to Keeping Me Company?
Yeah, please? Okay, willkommen bei. I want to translate the rumhängen mit Athena.
Rumhängen mit Athena.
Hanging out with Athena.
Give me a clean one. I'll stick it in the button.
No, it was clean. Okay, willkommen bei rumhängen mit Athena. Oder Yeah, Gesellschaft by Athena. That's a more accurate.
Brilliant. That's amazing. So how do you get? I guess it's like agency work.
Yeah, that was an agency, a sports agency. I used to translate for FIFA as well, so I've done quite a bit of soccer translation, soccer, but that was what they always called it.
Are you a football fan?
I am a big football fan.
Okay, so I think one of the biggest things that will always hold English football back is our players don't go abroad.
But it's changing a bit, isn't it? It's changing
slowly,
a bit. Yeah.
But they're still doing it in isolation, and they go abroad and they don't get put in the team. And I think it's a real shame because all the best players are coming here, the best English players are competing against they're like the best players in like North London, and they're competing against the best players from like the whole of Western Europe. Whereas you go to Bayern, or you go to Italy, or you go to even like Holland. So all of a sudden you could be the big fish in that small pond.
Sure.
And I think it would be better. At the moment, the England team is just a bunch of players who hate each other because they play against each other every week, and they're sleeping with each other's wives. And we're like, I feel passionately about that. Could you teach a footballer to speak a second language?
Well, yeah, sure.
Because they're not notoriously clever people.
Well, I mean, there are exceptions. Steve McManaman, who went and played for Madrid, he was very, very good Spanish. He does Spanish TV, Macca.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I think it's because his accent sounds Spanish already. When you listen, he's sort of on the go. Yeah, he's
and does Bale speak Spanish?
I think it's very bad.
I get the impression it's hideous, and that's why they hate him over there.
But,
as with
Beckham. But the ironic one was Woodgate, who spoke brilliant Spanish and was also voted the worst signing in Madrid's history, having scored an own goal on his debut and been sent off. I mean, that's the way to start, isn't it?
I forgot about Woodgate. They get a lot of English players in Madrid now. Because Owen went there. Yeah. Obviously, Lineker went to Barcelona, actually, really.
Well, the big guys. What was the name of the chap? God, he was killed in a car accident and he played for them in the 70s.
Oh, the black dude.
Black dude.
Oh,
they called him Black Flash.
They loved him.
Laurie Cunningham.
Laurie Cunningham.
Yes, Laurie Cunningham.
Absolute legend.
Pioneer.
Of the game, yeah.
But so Madrid seems to be this one continental club which loves signing English players and then falling out with them and hating them.
It's the way of the world. It's the way of the world. Who do you support?
I support Liverpool.
Why?
Yeah.
Oh, you're from the Midlands?
Well, yeah, there's not much going on there.
Well,
it was that or Forest. Yeah, it would have been Forest.
It
would have been Forest if I'd have been. There is no real excuse. My dad is a Wrexham fan.
Yeah.
So that would...
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough. But that's but actually go and watch football. I go and watch non-league stuff. And
really?
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by people because my dad was like that. I'd come home and he'd be watching like some shit. do you know what I mean? Where there's no grass, just mud, and there's 10 people in stands.
I'll hit you with it then. My dad is the former chairman of Ilkeston Town Football Club, which is a fairly significant non-league club. He was not the chairman because he bought it. He was the chairman because the real chairman was in trouble for fraud and made him the paper chairman. So he was just on paper the chairman, so the club wouldn't get indicted for fraud. Is that
where you got a love of non-league football?
I wouldn't say it was a love, but non-league football is very funny. So for comedians, it's a good environment.
And you watch it live?
Yeah, I mean, Orient are back in the league now, but I used to go and see them. I saw them in the FA. Was the FA Trophy or the Vase?
Okay, but
final.
They have quite a nice little stadium.
But yeah, Orient's a good club. It's got a good atmosphere. But yeah, I like if I go the Premier League experience. I mean, obviously it's really expensive, but I find it fairly underwhelming a lot of the time going and watch Premier League football.
I'm going to tell you something. Most football matches in England kind of boring. Really, I find myself drift. I tend to just watch a match in a day. And just cut up the good bits. Yeah. Because a lot of the time it's just players rolling around. Yeah. There's quite a lot of I don't know how to explain why it's boring. I just think nothing's happening most of the time. And you only ever get a good game, maybe. Let's say what are there? 13 Premiership matches in one weekend. Probably like one good game.
Yeah. Well, the Liverpool Man City game recently was really good. I've just written an article actually about why I've started to like football less, having been really passionate about it for a long time. And I think this is, sorry to bring it back to politics, but I think you know the phrase bread and circuses, like in the French Revolution, give them bread and circuses and they'll be fine. It feels to me when the country's I personally think the country's in a pretty bad way at the moment for a lot of different reasons. When things really deteriorate like this, you feel the bread and circuses aspect of football more. Like, oh, don't worry, just go and watch the game and don't worry your head. And like when you walk into the pub to watch the football and you see a load of homeless people, you're like, there's something about, you enjoy distraction more, I think, when times, some people would say when times are bad. I would say, yeah, but it gets mixed with something else, so sort of like.
You're absolutely right. So the tradition of football as a sport and as a spectator sport in this country is a working class tradition.
Yeah.
Right? So you work in the factory all week, slaving away, and then you pile into a football stadium in the terraces, and you'd shout at 22 men for 90 minutes to get it all out your system, and then you go back to the factory on a Monday again.
Yep.
And that's just the same thing, but in a different form. That's happening now. I am not a football. I used to support Man United, and I stopped being a supporter of Man United, and I stopped being incredibly passionate about club football. Basically because I just looked at everybody and I just thought, you're all mad. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're all getting angry and emotional over people who like, my personal thing, and I guess I'm going to get political here, like, black people are massively overrepresented in the Football League, in the Premier League in particular, and this is an incredibly wealthy demographic of our sporting culture. But that has literally had no impact in this country, right? And I feel really disappointed in these individuals, because I just sort of think, whilst you're, going out and having this incredibly lucrative career for not that much effort, actually, footballers are finished by 1 p.m. most days. And yes, they sometimes have to play 3 games in a week, and that's physically quite demanding. But, they also have a massive off season. And they get that. There's lots of pressures. There's also lots of privilege. And I just sort of think that we have all this success and all this wealth. What is the benefit of this? And yet we call these people heroes, but they've done nothing heroic. So if my daughter decides that a footballer, wherever they come from, wherever they're at, is a hero, I'll be like, think about that very carefully, because these are working class people, or mostly working class. It's not middle class things, one footballer who've attained a certain financial and social and cultural status. They've done fuck all with it, other than get tattoos on their arms. And I find that shocking when you think about the climate we live in now. When you think about Windrush, how does Windrush happen in a climate where most of the people, well, not most, but where a massive majority of the people who do something that a massive majority of this country care about say nothing? It's weird, isn't it? They occupy a very privileged place in society, and yet their kinfolk are being put on planes and taken someplace, and there's nothing. I'd go on strike. I wouldn't play for England. Why would I want to play for England if they are doing this right now? Imagine if every African or African descended footballer who was called up for England said, "Fuck you people, and sort out your government." Do it. So the lack of politicization of just generally the kind of black cultural and athletic elites baffles me, and it makes me wish that I'd enjoyed PE. I just think my brain in a six-pack might change this world, right? If I had this brain but I was a heptathlete winning gold medals, maybe things would be different. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd just care about my sport.
I'm being reminded of when Barney Luxton in year 8 offered that he and I will become a fighting duo with the words, "With my brawn and your brain we'll make a powerful team." I told this to my friend Nayan at the time, and he thought it was the funniest thing he's ever heard. The idea that us two would be any kind of threatening fighting unit was amusing to him.
Let's get some final thoughts, man. So what are you doing for the rest of the day?
I'm going to the doctors, actually, which is exciting. I've got to do a job application as well. I'm actually looking for a job at the moment, a proper full-time.
A translation job?
Yeah, I just applied for a job at a translator at the German embassy, fingers crossed
good
there.
Luck.
Guten
luck. I don't know.
But it doesn't mean anything, but I will take it.
What's good luck in German?
Viel Glück.
Much luck.
Yeah, much luck.
Viel Glück. I did German GCSE.
Yeah.
I got a B.
I did not do German GCSE, and I said
Ich mochte Hähnchen und Pommes frites.
You want chicken and fries, yeah?
Yeah.
That's why they pay me the interpreting.
Wir mochten.
Yeah, wir möchten. Yeah, auf jeden Fall.
I conjugated the verb for once. Good.
Yeah, so I'll be doing that, and then I'm going to be trying to be virtuous and do park run tomorrow.
Oh yeah, it's a Saturday.
Yeah.
I've not. I did 10 miles in October.
Yeah.
Which is awful because I've not trained. I'm trying to get back into running now. I'm running out of excuses. Before it was like I had a baby, but she's like 14 months now. Then it was like I'm moving house, but I've moved, and now I'm like don't have much in the way of excuses to not exercise. So I'm gonna have to get back on it. So you've just inspired me to find my local park run in my new area. And I'm going to do that. James, it's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you for the plantain.
Yeah, sorry I burnt it. I
like it burnt.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I always like bacon a little bit crispy as well.
Do you? Oh, there you go. James, thanks for coming round. Really appreciate it.
It's been a total pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. So that was James Harris. Thank you again, James, for coming out to my new digs to keep my company. It's appreciated. You've got to get involved with James. He's on Twitter. He tweets prolifically, perhaps more than I do. He's on his Twitter handle is @JamesHarrisNow. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you enjoy the podcast in general. If you do enjoy it, do what you normally do with podcasts you enjoy. Like, comment, share, chat to me. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and all that stuff. Tell your mates about it. You can subscribe. You can do all these really, really, really cool things, and that is wonderful for me because it lets me know that it's worth doing, and I think it's worth doing because I really enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch up next time.